Folks, welcome back. It's another episode. It's like we never left. It's episode 48 of the Friday Flows. Cam here from Tynes, joined by our very own Matt Muller. Matt, how are you doing?
Doing fantastic. Good to be here with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And folks, today's episode with Matt is reflecting on his 10 to 15 year journey within security. And the reason that we wanted to do an episode like this is I know for a lot of you that watch these episodes that gain insight into times and the technology and all of that. But I think this is a chance to kind of get some insight from Matt and give you folks some interesting perspective that might help you along your own journey in security. So I suppose, Matt, with that in mind, like to take us back just before we dig into like how you got started and the journey and what that's been like, how did you end up doing what you're doing now at Tynes? And I suppose what led you to go with Tynes for a role like this, maybe over another company?
Yeah, so I mean, I've known so many folks here at Tynes for a really long time. Coinbase, where I was the head of SecOps for almost 5 years, was one of like the earliest Tynes customers. And what impressed me right off the bat was the fact that Tynes was always super honest about what the platform did and didn't do, but would always also take the time to say, okay, maybe the product doesn't do this today, but help me understand why you want it to do it, right? Because at the end of the day, like building based on what customers want is just always like super impressed me about the Times ethos, right? And then, as I started to actually get to know the folks here as people, as human beings, I was like, oh, this is just a really sharp group of very kind people that are all like truly just here to like, be collaborative and it almost feels like an extension of my team, right? And so, what I was thinking about, like, what did I want to do next in my career? Um, I didn't know exactly what that role would look like necessarily. I knew I wanted it to involve cybersecurity, and I knew I wanted it to involve working with an excellent group of people. And man, that's what I've got here at Times.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I fully agree. It's funny when you meet the people behind all of it. You can make the connection between that and oh yeah, as a vendor,
Right.
the promise is kept and promises made and all of that. So that's good insight. So to take us back then, Matt, like how did you even end up in security? How did you get your start? And be keen to get some insight into how everything progressed role to role as you moved through your journey.
Yeah, so I'm actually a fully self-taught security practitioner. Never
No
went to
way.
school for it. Yeah, no formal education around it. As an undergraduate, I actually went to school for business. And like any enterprising business student, I started my own little company and was designing and building websites basically for just like local restaurants and and things like that. And one day I realized that these websites I'd been building were like being hacked and used to send spam, which was pretty annoying to me. And so I said, okay, well, I want to figure out how and why this is happening, right? Because this can't happen again. Like, I'm not going to let this happen again to me. And that really started my journey of just digging deeper into understanding cybersecurity and how to protect yourself, how to protect the things that you put online. And it's sort of been more or less a journey from there, right? And I think one of the fun parts about being a self-taught cybersecurity practitioner is the fact that, like, because there's no necessarily blueprint, I discovered pretty early on that, like, looking at other disciplines, other industries, other fields actually provided a ton of learning, right? Like, you can go, maybe memorize some facts about a security model for a particular platform, or you can go talk to your DevOps team because chances are like they've studied that particular system way more deeply than you have, right? Because it's their job to like keep it online. And so yeah, just being able to draw inspiration from a bunch of different sources has definitely been extremely helpful throughout my career. But when I first started getting into cybersecurity as an actual career field, I was at a small background screening company called Inflection, and they did like employment background screening for U.S. companies and things like that. And being a startup, there was always like, oh, there's something to do and nobody to do it. Is anyone available to pick this up? And I started picking up privacy. I started picking up cybersecurity. Started picking up cyber risk
Right.
and compliance and all these different things. And before you know it, 5 years have passed, and I've basically built out their entire cybersecurity and privacy program. Um, And about that time, Coinbase reached out to me asking if I was interested in building out their, kind of customer security and trust and safety function. And they were, kind of startup size, but growing really rapidly at that time as well. And so what started out as a, pure customer account security team within, I mean, like weeks also became, oh, let's do incident response internally. Oh, let's add threat intelligence. Oh, let's add insider threat, and all of these other pieces. And so that's again where I got to know Tynes, and again did that for about 5 years, and started thinking about, okay, like, what does the next sort of evolution of my time in cybersecurity look like. I would love to find something where I can chat with not just one company and learn the perspective at one company, but lots of different companies, right? And just see across so many different industries and verticals and all that, like, what are people doing in cybersecurity. And so here we are.
Yeah, absolutely. And in those two 5 year stints, Inflection and Coinbase, covering so many different bases, like obviously you had to learn very, very quickly. So I think taken from that experience, then if you were to take a security team from the ground up, a security operations team, and potentially an entire org, how would you approach that now if you were in that position? And kind of what are your thoughts on building a strong security team?
Yeah, one thing I had to learn fairly quickly was that my cybersecurity pain tolerance is a lot higher than most other people's, right? Because, I'm in cybersecurity. I understand the worst that can happen. And so I'm absolutely willing to, have a 60 character password, right? For my password manager. Like that's to me is like absolutely what you're supposed to do, right? And like for the average person who I realize is 99.9% of the population, that's just stupid, right? And they're not going to do that. That feels like so much friction between them and just like, using their password, right? And so, when I initially started building out security programs, I was really confused that everyone was frustrated with me because what I was telling them to do was so obviously more secure, but I wasn't taking the time to understand, like, how am I getting in the way of the thing you're actually paid to do, right? You're not paid to go do cybersecurity. I am. And your job is to go like literally do the account, like do the books, right? And like if we don't pay our vendors, the lights get shut off. Oh, and by the way, I don't get my paycheck, right? So maybe I
Right.
should think about ways that I can help you be more secure, but not frustrate you and stop you from doing your job. So that I think is like that is one of the biggest things I would do differently building out a cybersecurity program now, for sure.
Because it is definitely it's a dichotomy. You know what I mean?
Right.
It has to be, from my perspective anyway, looking at someone doing it, like it has to be a very difficult thing because it's proper security and then obviously enabling business and having that free flow and collaboration. It's nearly an oxymoron. That's so hard to balance. So that's obviously your biggest learning, but like how do you do that? How do you develop a security culture within a company without overly impacting the bottom line, I suppose.
Yeah, it starts with, partnering with the folks in IT, the folks in DevOps or infrastructure, because ultimately they're the ones that manage the technologies that your end users are going to be interacting with. And so, figuring out like, for example, nobody in IT and nobody in security wants shadow IT. And so
Right.
we are both incentivized to pick the most usable and most secure tool for the job, right? And like that's something that just involves a whole bunch of partnership and collaboration across like, again, we're not trying to bolt on two-factor authentication with yet another app to go install on your phone, right? Like maybe we can find something that supports passkeys, right? And so now you don't even need a password anymore. You can just tap a button and all of a sudden you're logged into this new tool. And so I think finding those opportunities to really push and say, security, like there's always going to be a little friction when it comes to security, but how can we also make people's lives easier and more secure, right? Like this is like I think the usability versus security trade-off is a little bit of a false dichotomy, right? Like if you push hard enough on that question, you'll often find ways to make people's lives easier while making them more secure. And so this is something that we did at Coinbase all the time, right? We were talking about amongst ourselves around like, okay, can we make people's lives easier? Can security make people's lives easier? And honestly, Tines was a pretty big part of that, right? Because being able to automate the parts of saying like, oh man, like we can allow people access to this thing, but behind the scenes we might want to do some more checks to see if maybe their session is compromised or things like that, right? we could implement better compensating controls, make people's lives easier, and again, still have that security assurance.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting, and a good use of automation, because obviously, you know yourself, like energy flows where your attention goes, and if you're thinking about making security more applicable across the business, that's the, you know, using something like Tines to make the delivery of a lot of those a much easier thing to do. So that's interesting to get insight into. So over the course of your career then, Matt, was there ever a period of time where, you know, something had happened that was particularly stressful for the team, that was a big learning experience, or something that was, I suppose, pause for reflection, that kind of changed how you think about security? Has there ever been a time where something like that's happened?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when you work in incident response, by definition, you're dealing with a lot of people's worst days.
Right.
And, I think for me, some of the biggest learnings have been that it's not just about what you do, right? It's not just about responding to the incident. It's about building up, not even just within security, but a whole organizational muscle around blameless retrospectives, making sure that we're solving the problem, not pointing fingers. Um, Security lives and dies by the company culture around it. And so if you have users that are scared to tell you something is going wrong, right? Maybe they push the wrong button and they're afraid that you're going to bite their head off and refer them to HR and get them fired. Like, congrats, you now have a longer time to detection, right? Because
Yeah,
they're afraid to come to you. And so really just, again, I think that's something that I really wish I'd focused on sooner. And just realizing that like the human half of security is actually the more important half in my view.
absolutely. Absolutely. Interesting. Last question. So for anyone that is watching this, as I said, it's always going to be practitioners that, you know, a variety of a variety of different people in different parts of their security journey. But for you personally, like if you could go back and, you know, start all over, talk to Matt Muller 10, 15 years ago when he did start, like, is there any distinctive piece of advice you would give? Maybe you've already mentioned it there, but is there anything that you would say to yourself if you had to start all over?
Um, be less afraid of admitting you don't know something.
Yeah,
And I think life has gotten more challenging for people who are entering cybersecurity now, right? The field has continued to expand. The number of technologies that exist in the world that you're responsible for protecting like continues to grow, right? And so there's always going to be more to learn. And I think people look to the security team often as like, oh, they'll know what to do, right? But often we don't. And so, building up the art of saying like, hey, I don't know this, right? Can you help walk me through this, right? Honestly, asking somebody like, hey, I don't understand your system. I don't understand like, exactly what different threats could impact this, but what do you think is the worst thing that could happen? Honestly, adds like they get to come across as experts, right? And they get to teach you
100%.
something, which feels good. And you get to be a better defender, right? So like having that humility to say, I don't know, super powerful in any career, but I think often like most valuable in cybersecurity.
Awesome. Great stuff. Matt, thank you very much. Folks, as always, if you enjoyed the episode, please like and repost on LinkedIn. And obviously make sure to follow the channel if you're watching this on YouTube. If you want to see anything else included in the series, please let us know in the comments. And yeah, thank you for checking out another episode of the Friday Flows. Matt, thanks again. Great to have you on. Folks, we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks so much, Cameron.